Is Isabella von Carstein as a Lord any good in patch 6.0.3? I've been playing her as a Lord, quote-unquote, an awful lot to learn the Count's faction. Were I a bard, I would sing her praises and honor her power and beauty. As it is, I lost my singing voice in my mid-teens, and it's not a soprano, tenor, or alto, so I'm up the river Styx without a ferryman. I will settle for making this god. Recruited by taking the bold step of not picking Vlad as your Sylvania legendary lord, Isabella is the standard 250 upkeep on foot. On Ultra scale, she gets 4,208 health. As common to vampires of her stature, she gets 90 armor, no shield, missile resistance the basic 15%, leadership starts at 18. Speed 40 and charge speed 43 is more nimble than a Lamian bloodline lord in terms of normal speed, slightly less so on the charge specifically. Melee attack begins at 50. 50 is uncommonly low for a vampire lord or hero. Attack interval of 4 is standard. Splash rocket size is medium, so ordinary cavalry on down, and at her weapon strength, max target's damage by splash is 5. Melee defense begins at 65, and this is uncommonly high even for Lamians. Like Lamians, her weapon strength is 480 divided between 310 base and 170 armor piercing, and while that is by no means a low amount of armor piercing, lack of specialization in that area means that a lot of her damage against an Ungrim Iron Fist, the Slayer who wears that stupidly thick armor, will be negated, and so on. Charge bonus is 25 and mass is 600. I'll mention now because there's little else to define her in traits. Like Vlad, she gets Master of Beguilement, 100 meter range, 44 second duration, a mighty minus 40 melee attack on the target, 90 second cooldown once that duration is up. Yes, it's more micro, but it's a big deal against elite targets. And that is not just confined to characters, you can use it on units. On a Barded Nightmare, cost rises to 275, health rises to 4,860, armor to 110, speed to 78, charge speed 108, charge bonus 50, mass 1500. All other stats are the same on paper, but from what I'm seeing of a Lamian on a Barded Nightmare, animations may be limiting the number of targets hit in a lot of situations for better or worse. If you want unique hero animations and want her to brawl the best she can, put her on foot, I guess. On a health steed, cost rises to 325, health is the same as the last, armor is back down to 90, speed 80 and charge speed 105 while flying, a third less when grounded, I believe. Charge bonus is still 50 default and mass is 1000. So, to get this out of the way, she doesn't get a zombie dragon and she has little to distinguish her from vampire heroes in the middle of a brawl. As a faction leader, Beloved In-Depth has her start with 1 Blood Kiss, get access to the special vampire building for starting headquarters Castle Drakenhof, grants hero capacity for vampires plus 3, starts with Vlad as a legendary hero, and vampire heroes that are not Vlad get plus 25% weapon strength when embedded in an army. Nothing here says they have to be embedded in Isabella's army for that bonus, by the way, but just keep in mind they're still heavily slanted toward base damage. You will never make them elite armor-piercing units with melee. You can make them very good at it with special items, but that's a faction issue, not a knock on the overall excellent vampire hero. As a general, Dark Retinue echoes her hero trait, granting her plus 50% battle healing cap when in the same army as Vlad, but he's so powerful you should consider splitting them up later. Consider, at least. Otherwise, the only thing she grants is vampire heroes get plus 10 melee attack and plus 10 melee defense in her army. But again, that's going to be a lot less effective against heavy armor, and that can't be overcome easily by the heroes themselves. As a general, Isabella has access to all the excellent blue line skills, the excellent red line skills, and the powerful lore of vampire lines, but in no way has any unique changes to them specific to Isabella. She gains access to the trio of Aura of Dark Majesty, Dark Pact, and plus 5 leadership when attacking is not to be taken lightly, and Grave Ward for better resistance against missiles since she's going to be shot at a lot. Aside from that, there are 2 big deals here. The first is that, like the Lamian, she gets Queen Bee available at rank 10 for 1 pip, which has the same absolutely bonkers Spymaster super buffs for hero actions in her region, and a debuff to enemy hero actions too. This is a huge deal, and as I went over in the Lamian video, yes, this stacks, and there are times when you absolutely need it to do so if you want to take chances from 75% to 98% or something like that. That's minus 50% action cost, plus 50% success chance, and minus 25% chance for enemy heroes. Now I want to point out this minus 50% action cost and plus 50% success chance is for all heroes. It is not specific to just vampires. The second is her very personal law. Midnight's Children unlocked for 1 pip at rank 12, grants leadership +8 and melee attack +8 for everything in the forest building chain including Fellbats, Dire Wolves, Vargeists, and Varghouls. Only the latter has armor above 10 by default. Having said that, these are massive buffs and we're not even done. Moreover, the regular skill tree pips do not add melee attack for these units. At Dawn They Sleep grants 2 effects to Fellbats and Direwolves. First, it adds the Hunger, meaning they have sustain in melee they didn't before. Well, that's nice, but it's hard to use in a difficult situation. It's absolutely awesome when chasing down units they can gobble. Speaking of that, the second effect is to add +5 armor-piercing melee damage. What that means, okay, is that Fellbats go from 6 armor-piercing to 11 armor-piercing per melee hit in her army only, and Direwolves go from 3 armor-piercing to 8 armor-piercing. Fellbats can get an additional 1 from a tech, and Direwolves get 5% weapon strength from a tech, so point being, both become kind of decent and will gobble through medium armor far better than before. Though extra damage is extra damage, and Slayers will feel it even if it's AP. Also, just remember that Razor standards are amazing with both units when they are buffed to this level. Court of Blood grants hero action cost for vampires -33% faction-wide, and that will stack to ridiculous levels if it's within Isabella's own region with Queen Bee active. Vampire hero capacity +2 on top of what she had before, and vampiric corruption +2 faction-wide. That's for places where you have a foothold. Let's say you had a single settlement in a 4-settlement province. Well, you'd get an extra +2 passive corruption spread, not +2 over the entire map, at least that's my understanding. It still helps. The Ravening Beast reduces fatigue buildup for Isabella's army by 33% and grants a faction-wide 33% cooldown to Bloodlust and Red Fury, which are Lord skills, Vlad the Hero accepted, that require yellow melee line investment. Isabella also has a full yellow line. Now, I'm a big lover of these, but the point is you need loss of leveled lords to truly get the benefit longer term. Storm of the Night is something I covered in my Von Carstein Bloodline Lord video, and it's Karl, Azeg, and Elspeth insurance, and absolutely shouldn't be ignored. But against Ungrim, worthless! He isn't even bringing gyro bombers most of the time, so it's absolutely fantastic when you get to use it, but it's dead weight otherwise. Oh well. Finally, Time of Arising gives a whole bunch of things. First, it gives Isabella the Discouraged debuff in melee attacks full time, so -16 morale to anything she hits. Next, a +30% speed buff is applied to Fellbats, Dire Wolves, Vargeists, Varghouls, and Terrorgeists. To the same, Wayfarer is applied, which grants ×3 acceleration and deceleration for more crazy moves, and automatically applies Strider to all of the affected units where it was not present, which means bye-bye penalties for terrain. You can fight Wood Elves in Forest. Well, it doesn't get rid of their buffs, but, you know. You can fight Lizardmen in the Forest, and it's not going to be any pain to you. Isabella as a Lord has to actually fight for her legendary item, the Blood Chalice of Bathory. It's not a super hard fight, but fighting it as soon as she becomes rank 8 can be scary if she doesn't have a sufficient entourage. Point being, it grants her personally ward save 5%, enemy hero action success chance -10%, wound recovery time -1 for all characters, like those with critical failures for agent actions. Casualty replenishment +5% for all units in her army, and the ability of the item, 60-meter cast range only, self or ally, 26 seconds duration, can only be cast on lords and heroes, but it's a -2% fatigue buildup per second, and 1.6% healing per second, fantastic recovery. Of course, you will run into issues of healing caps with something this good, but the thing is, if you have multiple heroes, this definitely helps. And do remember that healing is impeded if a character is on fire. So, with all this said, how do we use Isabella as a faction leader? Well, also, how do we level her and run her in campaign? I've tried so many variations, I'm going to say what I consider some bitter truths. As much as I'd like to recommend making her a full spellcaster, I just can't, at least not at the start. Flying Lore of Vampire spellcasters, they're great, but it's like with real estate. Location, location, location. And her location is defined by 4 threats at the beginning and a huge ton more later. Drycha's Wood Elves, Empire everything, dwarfs enough to make her grow a beard in frustration, and greenskins just because they're there too. Of these, Isabella personally and her faction generally are overtuned for being competitive against the Empire. They're definitely not overtuned for fighting so many greenskins that their zombies get outnumbered. Dwarf slayers out of every cave, and even if not Zilfbar's armored ones, can include some very legit high-end units, and you have to try and deal. So while Wind of Death from a Hellsteed is a fun option, and going blue line super hard and leveling a hero Doomstack is the so-called optimal way to play, and maybe more what you do on Legendary because of the upkeep advantages. For short of that, this is what I've learned. Those 3 pips in the Unliving Host are the best early investment you can possibly make, period. Yes, even compared to the other choices. Isabella's starting army, incidentally, not including her starting Vampire Generic and Vlad, are a Graveguard with Halberds, a normal Graveguard, a Crypt Ghoul unit, and those are stronger now, a Black Coach, a Vargeist unit that's one of your superstars early on, and a Vargulf, and those are virtually unkillable now by almost anything early game that'll be thrown at you, but while they attack furiously and neurotically, they attack narrowly. The Black Coach is much better, and my Siege Survival Guide video shows how amazing they are in a faction desperately needing Gate Busters, though it is not, ipso facto, a Siege attacker. Isabella is, you can start a Siege battle with just her. So anyway, here are the units affected by the Unliving Host. Zombies, Skeleton Warriors and Spearmen, Graveguard, including regular, great weapons, and halberds, Crypt Ghouls. That's 7 units, in a faction desperate for every point of melee attack and defense in fights, and moreover 3 pips gains you 8 points each, where with a lot of factions the max you'd get is 6, and 6 is actually really good for them. In other words, where Empire Swordsman can gain 12 points from the early red line, and that's pretty good. All the above units getting 16. The reason I'm not recommending Call of the Night is that the reason for getting that is increased speed, which is nice, but Fellbats and Direwolves have plenty, and once Isabella gets her personal line done, they have tons and tons more. And charge bonus plus 12 flat, which means cycle charging them very aggressively. Yes, that's nice, but charge bonus is something you only get to use some of the time. Melee combat is most of the time. Creatures of the Night affects Vargeists, Vargulfs, Terrorgeists, and Crypt Horrors, which means building-wise it's all over the darn map. For Isabella, Vargeist and her starting Vargulf are key units, and you can make them even stronger with this, yes. And that's usually what I've done, but there is another option. I'm going to offer as a strong alternative putting 3 pips in Evil Souls, which grants plus 8 melee attack to Karn Wraiths, Hex Wraiths, and Morn Ghouls, which benefit from the exact same early redline skill, though they come from 3 separate buildings. The melee attack is very hard for them to haunt without when push comes to shove. If it wasn't for location, I might say otherwise, but the blunt truth is that Modern Empire does not recruit many mages, because it values engineers that much more, and dwarfs, short of Hammerers or Ungrim himself, or a Demon Slayer Lord, really do not have much for magic damage. Well, the other one would be Thoric, but he's bugging Manfred, so there. Point is, a lot less is going to punish you for using ethereal units, a lot less than you'd probably think. The exception is Drycha, but the real, reliable cure for that is more Graveguard, see the Unliving Host above. Oh, and also Balefire Corpse Guards. Don't fight Drycha without it. If you're not actually using this right away, then honestly you could just drop the red line and get the blue line stuff. Sooner or later, you will get your Vampire Doomstack. I'm just here to tell you, you do not need to start it on turn 3. You don't need to. The special building takes 2 turns to build. You can get your economy and early military needs in order prior to that, and like I said, against dwarfs, more vampire heroes are only going to go so far anyway. That, and there's a real problem in this roster with the mindset we need to be reliant on magic because magic can fail us, whether it's because of the Changeling or just Sylvania not having lots of wins that month. The point is, even without much for red line investment in the current state of the game, Isabella's personal line will make her hitting power with her favored units immense. For the legendary battle, you shouldn't even consider doing it without Vlad, because just his Vanguard deployment for all units in the army is a luxury you'll love in that instance. Although Graveguard with Halberds are the new elite solution to Ogres, Treekin, and Heavy Cavalry, without the Unliving Host their stats aren't actually that great, which is to be expected at this point. In fact, one of the only reasons I don't recommend Black Knights as hard as I normally would is purely because there's so much stuff that they're not equipped for. Mainly medium to high armor dryads and treekin and lots of dwarf stuff, though Slayer Pirates they'll handle that great. So yeah, they're at least adequate for a lot of stuff, they're resilient enough, but they're priced where they are because of the limitations. Going forward, I think you need to argue with yourself and actually come up with a serious and tangible reason why you aren't building Isabella 4 more units of Vargeis and adding them in. Either the enemy can punish this or they can't. With her speed buffs, Vargeists are even harder to shoot down from the sky, and unless the enemy is truly capable of doing so, you will have an overwhelming aerial advantage, something Isabella can use to brutally punish the foe. If she has the heroes and the magic, she can take care of a lot else, even without a secondary army at her beck and call. Ultimately, even though I argue in favor of not hero spamming on turn 3 on up, and I mean with vampires, you will eventually do so even while battling the National Dark Magic budget final boss. Why do you do this? One word: corruption. Yes, more than prowess in battle, more than farming blood kisses, more than replenishing troops, vampire heroes are so valuable because they spread corruption. And 2 pips at rank 5, and your heroes start at rank 4 with the tier 1 Drakenhof building would increase corruption in that province by 4 points per turn, all other things being equal, which they aren't going to be. You're going to drown regions in corruption that have active sources, making them untainted and damaging to your armies. If a region is foreign but still has sufficient corruption, you can avoid taking damage, and with Channeling Stance, you can actually replenish troops without the raiding stance. If it does not have vampiric corruption in your favor, you will take that damage, and it's quite hard to work militarily through vassalized territory or whatever. Unless you're raiding and then you're, getting them to hate you. Thus, long-term, even if you use minions/pawns to push your effective boundaries further, you can't actually help them out against Throughout the Unclean, wiping out your poor ally Katerin unless you can cross her territory unscathed. This may require sacrifices of some sort, going through mutually exclusionary choices when Katerin wages war on Drycha when you have a non-aggression pact with her, but need her lands to save Katerin's fur hat. But you muddle through. And I redid that part of that campaign, and Drycha broke her non-aggression pact with me, and here's the thing. When the AI breaks the non-aggression pact, you can go to war with them the next turn, and it's not considered a hit to your reliability. This is very good to know, because Averland. Yeah. Vassals give you opportunities to build up your home territories that you otherwise might not have. It's valuable if you are using it to shut off a front that you do not want to have to fight on, because the best use of vampire accounts and their ability to raise large armies quickly is to do it on narrow fronts, because if you dilute that between all sorts of fronts, you cannot put 2 or 3 armies of trash against stuff, because you don't have enough armies, even when you have enough resources for a few good armies. You'll just drown. So you use vassals to give yourself some breathing room, but you need to still leave yourself somebody to fight. Put bluntly, even you don't have the formerly mortal manpower to build enough armies with enough good, hard-hitting units with your trash to drown out the worst of your opposition, so a mix of building battle sites, which is largely done through getting your zombies turned into fertilizer, and building a powerful production capability in Sylvania, contrary to most people's normal advice. Benefiting greatly from recruitment capacity increases provided by charnel pits and so on, well, you can rebound from losses very nicely. You have to be running the finances at enough of a surplus to actually have margin for error to work with, and to be able to pay for the forces you raise from the dead, so at some point, losses are built into the combat stop. You just want to try and use Bloodline Lords efficiently. This is why you need to make your enemies eat your corruption grave dust and choke on it. If they want to come after you, they'll have to either play perfectly and occupy every settlement and purify that land, or they'll make mistakes, even catastrophic mistakes. That's one way you maximize the power of the minimum number of armies. For Bloodline unlocks, without getting deeply into that, since I'll do a video on that issue alone at some point, they're all good, but even if it's just the first pip and plus 20% to ambush success chance, that Strigoi unlock does help. And Strigoi are really effective as one vamp armies. Lamians are wonderful, though more effective at actual brawling if left on foot, and while the cavalry busts from the Blood Dragons are nice, Von Carstein Lords have some of the most powerful synergy with Isabella and Vlad. I know people like to scorn the Sylvanian crossbowmen, but as a levy, the number of unlocks is the maximum you can have at one time. That's your only meaningful restriction. Lose them, get more next turn, up to your maximum value. Whatever their value in the field is a completely different ballgame, defending cities against opponents that did not bring proper siege engines to do the job right. If the enemy gives you time to empty the ammo, the crossbowmen get 100% of their potential out during that time. That can be very powerful, because your skeletons are going to do your skeleton things. In the end, Isabella has her limitations, but she's so powerful through her entourage. Lords with 33% less Red Fury cooldown starts to add up in epic fashion that the result is far more than the sum of her and Vlad alone. Once she can get corruption up everywhere she pleases, every incoming attacker must fight through it, and the slightest mistake, sacking a town rather than occupying it and ending the corruption attrition, is something she can punish brutally. At some point, enemies coming with heroes just becomes another blood kiss farming chance. You shouldn't be aiming to build around this specifically, but if you're facing an opponent dire wolves and fellbats are still effective against, 130 to 140 speed units are really something out there. Try it out, and don't cry too much if they get pasted. You can always get more. It's just this gives you a lot of chances to be aggressive and to recover from losses. It's less so with Vargeist, but that's why the synergy with the Von Carstein Bloodline Lords is such a big deal. Being able to one-turn recruit 6 Vargeists to go back into the fray, well, your enemy had better have a very specific setup to deal with that, or it'll have a bad time. Just keep in mind they're not quite as good if Isabella isn't leading them. In the end, it's hard to gobble up the Empire because the other side has a lot of armies it can raise to throw at you, and your garrisons tend to suck in ways not related to blood. But the more territory you take, the more money you can earn, and once you get unwalled settlement battles to work with and stuff like that, the enemy can make a lot of mistakes misjudging based on your no-range vampire compositions. Garrisons with crypt ghouls can magically make artillery disappear, and so on. If you can't win that specific fight, set yourself up to win the next fight. That helps. Finally, one of the main costs of not taking Vlad is not having the global plus 10% campaign movement range. There's a tech that helps, but besides that, you're looking at Banshees. I know they're not favored by the community, but the movement range they provide in campaign can be a huge help. At least consider this as you expand your empire further. Sometimes being in the right place matters more than the army you have with you. Take care, and have fun bringing corruption and intrigue to the world. Once her hero action Death Star gets going, it's going to be really hard to stop.